Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about part 2 of my birth story. Okay, so like I mentioned, we tried all the natural things all weekend long. Then Sunday night, February 27th, at around 5:45 p.m., I started having semi-frequent Braxton Hicks, enough that I was noticing it. By this point in the day, we'd done all the things. We were on the couch, like making dinner. Well, Jordan was making dinner. I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and we just kind of relaxed that evening. So I was just noticing that I was having more Braxton Hicks. I was still having a little bit of that back pain, and I kept getting down on the floor to kind of like roll around on the birth ball because I just had the feeling that I couldn't get comfortable. So we went to bed about 10 o'clock that night, and I remember waking up around 11:30 with some more like Braxton Hicks. Woke up again around 5:30 with some more Braxton Hicks. But then I kept thinking every time I wake up, like, oh my gosh, next time I wake up, it's gonna be like go time. It's gonna be time to go to the hospital. And then I would fall back asleep for the rest of the night. So I actually slept really well that night. And so I woke up around 7 o'clock, which is a little early for me, but in pregnancy I'd been waking up earlier. And at 7 o'clock, I put my AirPods in and I listened to my daily audio Bible. After that, I turned on one of the Built to Birth labor affirmations meditations. I think I actually listened to the inducing labor meditation. I'm not saying that that's what did it, because I'd listened to that for like the previous week and nothing had happened. So I'm not saying the meditation did it, but in the middle of that meditation, my water broke. So they say it's way more common for your contractions to start first rather than your water breaking, but for whatever reason, my water broke first. So if this has never happened to you, it honestly felt like someone snapped a rubber band inside my uterus and then you just like feel a gush. So I really didn't want to like wet the bed. So I hopped up super quickly and ran to the restroom. I almost made it to the bathroom, you know, had a little bit leaking along the way, but I was able to not get any in the bed, which is good because that was like the last thing I wanted to clean up before going to the hospital. So I'm like in the bathroom, my water is like gushing out. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm so happy I'm going into labor naturally, praise the Lord, but this is not how I expected it to start. So I wasn't sure what to do because, as you've seen in my other videos, my plan for going into labor naturally was I was going to labor at home like up until my contractions were like 3 minutes apart, which is quite a ways along. I had all these plans to like light the candles upstairs, turn on the meditations, you know, be in my Zen space, whatever. I had all my snacks. And I was like, okay, but now my water's broken. I feel like that changes things. So I call labor and delivery and I was like, hey, can I talk to the midwife on duty? And they're like, oh, there's no one in right now. Cause like, again, it was 7:20 in the morning. And they're like, can we have them give you a call? And I was like, sure. And again, it was my favorite midwife that I had seen the week before. Shout out to Carly. So she gave me a call back probably 10 minutes later, and I explained to her, okay, so my water broke, not really having any contractions anymore. I had mentioned through the night I had felt a little bit and felt like things were moving, but then this morning my water broke, I was feeling nothing, like no contractions at all. And she's like, okay, well, generally after your water breaks, the contractions are following shortly, so you know, stay tuned for that. And again, come in when your contractions are like 3 to 5 minutes apart. If your contractions don't start, we do worry about infection when your water breaks, and so we really don't want to wait too long. So if it gets to be like 6 hours after your water breaking, we want to have you come into the hospital and we'll try and get things moving. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I go upstairs and there's just like so many little love notes from God throughout this labor and delivery. Just everything worked out so beautifully. So me as a planner, something I've been thinking about a lot was when I go on maternity leave, I really wanted to have everything like buttoned up, tie a bow on it, like pass it off. I didn't want any question marks. I didn't want anything falling through the cracks. when I tried to explain this to like my boss, he was like, haha, that's funny. It's obvious this is your first kid. And I was like, I know, it's probably not gonna happen, but like, I'm really gonna try. I want it to be as organized as possible. Well, with my water broken and no pain from any contractions, about 8 o'clock, I'm upstairs. I had my yoga mat laid out and then I laid a towel down because, fun fact, your water breaks in that one gush, but then it continues leaking the entire time. Something I did not know. Just the two of us working from home, waiting for contractions to begin. Water broke this morning. It's baby day. Anyways, so I'm sitting on the yoga mat, got the towel laid down, and I bring out my work laptop. I set up my out of office message. I sent a big long email to my boss detailing like, here's the projects I was working on. This is like what needs finished. This is who it could be assigned to. See note right here for what spreadsheet they need to reference, whatever. This detailed note, just passing everything off with a bow on it, exactly as I wanted. And so that was perfect. Shut my laptop after probably like an hour or two. And then I was like, okay, are we having any contractions? And so then I started like really focusing in. Mind you, this whole time I'm like snacking because I want to make sure I have as much fuel in my body as possible when I get to the hospital. And I also have some movies on. So we watched The Holiday, and then I think it's called Home Again, the one with Reese Witherspoon. So just watched a couple fun movies. Jordan also, because it's so funny, my water broke at 7:20. That's the time his alarm usually goes off. So I texted him from the toilet after I called the midwife and was like, hey, by the way, you're not going to work today. And so he actually worked from home, from the couch upstairs. So he was working on the couch, I was working on the yoga mat. And then when I finished work, I was just kind of sitting there and I was like, okay, let's really tune in and start to notice if you're feeling any contractions. And so I was able to tune in a little bit more. I was having some contractions, and again, so funny, I was prepared from our birth class that like you do not time contractions until they're so noticeable you can't not notice them. Basically, like you don't want to try and feel the contractions because it's going to make your labor feel longer. Well, in this case, I needed to see if I was contracting or not because I needed to start contracting. So I started paying attention. I started timing them, and they were about 7 to 10 minutes apart. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. Like we have some sort of consistency. Like it's not happening a lot, but like it's not happening frequently, but it's happening consistently. So I felt good about that. But again, it was so light. It was like the most mild period cramps you've ever felt. And I honestly had to like really tune in to be like, okay, is it starting? Is it stopping? Like, cause the tail ends were so soft, you could really only feel that middle part. And so yeah, timed it. It was like 7 to 10. And then as the day went on, it went to like 10 to 12 minutes apart. And I was like, okay, we're going in the wrong direction. So Jordan made a wonderful lunch. I was like, I need to carbo load on something because I don't know how long this is gonna last once we get to the hospital. So he made me a big bowl of pasta. So I ate the pasta, finished our movie, and at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was time to head to the hospital. Where are we going, babe?
Gonna have a baby.
Woohoo! So we arrived to the hospital about 1:20 in the afternoon on Monday, February 28th. And so we get to the hospital, We check in. My midwife is there because, of course, I'd been talking with her earlier in the morning, and I think she actually checked in at one point. She like called me back again mid-morning and was like, "Hey, any contractions? Like, what are you thinking?" And so I had to let her know at that point, like, "No, it's still about 10 minutes apart. Like, but we'll be coming in at 1 o'clock regardless." So she met us at the hospital about 1 o'clock or 1:20. And we just kind of chatted about what was to come. So she checked my cervix and I was dilated to a 3, which I was perfectly happy about. I was a 2 at my 38-week appointment. So a week and a half later being at a 3, I was happy with. I hadn't had a ton of contractions, so I wasn't anticipating being like super far along, of course. But I was just happy that there had been movement. So we were at a 3. And I knew this going in. You've seen in my previous videos, I did not want Pitocin. That was like the last thing that I wanted because it kind of manufactures your contractions. It can be harder to go natural, which was my plan. Well, I even told Jordan driving to the hospital, like, I know we're gonna have to do Pitocin. Like, that's just what we're gonna have to do because it's been 6 hours. I'm not contracting enough. That's just what's gonna have to happen, and I have to be okay with it. It was also funny driving to the hospital because the entire time I had envisioned driving to the hospital, again, I planned on laboring at home till they were like 3 to 5 minutes apart. So I was thinking when we were heading to the hospital, I was gonna be like in the zone, eyes closed, like not even looking. And so it was so funny driving to the hospital, feeling perfectly fine, just like chit-chatting with my husband and like knowing it was coming, but not feeling the pain of it coming. So that was really interesting. So anyways, chatted with the midwife and she was like, "Yep, we're gonna have to do Pitocin because we need to get these contractions moving along because 18 hours after your water breaks is when they start to worry about infection." So it had already been 6. So we knew within the next 12 hours we needed to get baby out. So they made the call to get the Pitocin started. But of course, things in the hospital, when it's not an emergency, of course, things take a while. So we probably hung out in the room for a good hour or so, just kind of like Jordan went down to the car, brought all the stuff in, we got it all organized, turned on some music, I was having some snacks, and we just kind of got used to the space. So after probably an hour or 2, they came in, they started the Pitocin, and other reason I didn't want Pitocin was because then you have to have the IV. So if you don't have to be hooked up to anything, they can just like start the IV but put a cap on it so you have like free range of motion, you're not attached to anything. Well, with Pitocin, since it comes through the IV, I then was attached to the little tree. And after that, we decided to go on a walk around the maternity ward. So I got my little tree, I'm in my hospital gown, and me and Jordan decided to do some laps around the facility. And that was also great because it gave us an opportunity, because our midwife walked around with us the first time. If I haven't mentioned before, these midwives are employees of the hospital, so they know their surroundings. So she walked around with us the first lap and kind of pointed out like, okay, here's the nurse's desk, here's the snack station, here's this, and kind of gave us the lay of the land, which was super helpful. And so yeah, we walked around, and by the end of walking those laps, we were having to stop occasionally, and I would just have to breathe through the contractions. It's not that I couldn't walk through them, it was just more comfortable to kind of like settle and breathe through the contraction. And so that's what we did. So things were moving along. We got back to our room, and I remember we looked at the clock around like 4:30ish, and that was shortly after we'd gotten back to the room. And we both kind of joked because I mentioned before, or I don't know if I mentioned on here, I know I mentioned on my Instagram stories, I was updating you guys, that I had all our closest friends and family make guesses for when they thought the baby was gonna come. Well, I guessed Monday, February 28th, all along. Like, that was my guess basically from the beginning. And a ton of other people guessed it as well. I think there was 6 others that like put down that as their guess, and there was countless others that had said Monday, February 28th. But then when I was like, oh my gosh, that's what everyone's saying, they're like, oh, well then no, I'll change it. But probably at least 10 people, including myself, guessed this was the day. And so when it was like 4:30 and things were still like kind of in the early stages, me and Jordan were like, oh shoot, is she even gonna come today? Like, is she gonna prove us all wrong and come tomorrow on March 1st? And then that was probably the last time I looked at the clock for a long time.
Yeah. Came to just nudge you up a smidge. When you're feeling these, are they in the front or the back or both or?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
That last one was a little more in the back.
Okay.
Yeah, so after that, tried some different positions. This is something that I absolutely loved about having the nurse midwives. If you are trying to do a natural labor and delivery in a hospital setting, highly recommend a nurse midwife for this reason. I think doulas might be able to do the same thing. I'm not entirely sure, but they were great. I say they. Carly was amazing at just having us mix up positions. She would have me sit in one position for a while, probably half hour to an hour maybe, and then we would switch things up. So I sat like on the bed, I think it was called throne position, and then I sat down. They have like a bar that you can hold on to, again kind of like doing that pressure. And then they also, as things started getting a little more intense, started doing counter pressure. So that's either putting pressure on like your lower back or on your knees or different areas like that. And what I loved was she would start doing the counter pressure to see like, was it effective? Was it helping me? And if it was, then she would go to my husband, Jordan, show him how to do it, and then he would take over doing the counter pressure. So he kind of got to be involved in the process. Absolutely loved that. Well, I'm assuming it was around 6 o'clock. Jordan and I, neither of us were really watching the clock, so all of this is kind of an estimation, but somewhere around 6 or 6:30, things had intensified. We were doing a lot of counter pressure, and I was starting to vocalize a little bit. It was more so just like the deep humming, like the humming was getting louder. Highly recommend the Built to Birth channel here on YouTube for recommendations on like breathing techniques during labor, because the breathing techniques were so helpful. But yeah, it's just like as you feel a contraction coming on, you're just like breathing in and like humming out. And so that's what I was doing. And so that was getting louder. So the midwife was like, okay, I'm hearing things progressing from, you know, the sounds I hear coming from you. So let's go ahead and check to see where you're at. So she checked me. I was dilated to about a 5 at this point, and that's when she realized that my water had broken up high. So if you're picturing the sac, so the water had broken up high, it was leaking out kind of around the side, but then the sac itself was kind of just like sagging and, as they call it, bulging out of the cervix. So the water wasn't like free flowing, I guess you could say. Like the bag was still intact at the bottom. And so she gave me the option to break my water, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's either that or we end up upping my Pitocin later to get things moving. So let's keep it natural. Let's break the water and go. So she went up there, she broke the water, did kind of like another membrane sweep. And that was I wouldn't say it was painful. It's not comfortable. That happened, and then things started to move along a lot quicker after that point. So what I thought was so funny was right before that check, when I was noticing like things are getting more intense, they turned to Jordan and they're like, Jordan, have you eaten yet today? Or like, have you had dinner? And he was like, no, like I've been in here. And they're like, oh, go downstairs, go get some dinner. And he was like, okay. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. But also, like, couldn't we have done this when nothing was going on? But I'm sure they have their reasons. So they did that, they checked my dilation, broke the water. And then I was like, okay, would this be a good time to maybe get in the tub? Because I really had wanted to do some of that laboring in the tub. So we moved me on over into the tub, and I wish we would have like gotten a little video of this, because it was really nice, because we had the lights super low. They have those battery operated candles like in the room with the tub. So it is like very much a Zen mood. We of course had my labor playlist going at this point, which highly recommend, especially if you're, I mean, regardless, if you're a person of faith, go to the Calming Christian playlist on Spotify. It is so good. That is what I listen to. If you're not a person of faith, just, you know, whatever Zen music you like. But this was really great, and it's also super cool. Another little God moment of one of the songs came on, and my nurse, I had the nurses switched over right in the middle. I think, yeah, at like 5 p.m. or something, there was like a nurse change. So the new nurse that came in at 5, there was a song playing. I forget what one it was. But she was like, is this Carrie Job? And I was like, yeah, I think it is. And she was like, oh my gosh, I love her. And then we just kind of got to talking, and found out we go to the same church, which is crazy. After she said that, I kind of recognized her, but they hadn't been going to church for a while because of COVID and things like that. But yeah, so my nurse was a fellow church member, which was really cool. So anyways, I get in the tub, had the little candles going, my Zen playlist. It was great. Jordan gets back from dinner at this point when I'm already in the tub, and it was a pretty small room, so he just had to like sit in the doorway. Well, I went through transition in the tub, and I will say transition is the worst part of labor because there is no relief. And so he, of course, wasn't able to like do much to help when I was in the tub. And so I remember at one point him being like, hey, how's it going? And I was just like, like I just continued my breathing. I didn't even open an eye to like acknowledge him. I was just like, this is how it's going. And so it's interesting because people talk about transition as like, oh, that's the time when you like start asking for the epidural. That's when you're like, I can't do this, like get me out of here, all this stuff. I luckily did not experience any of that. It was just that like internal mindset. Like I could not deal with any like external stuff. I just had to go very much internal. And the biggest thing was I could not for the life of me get comfortable. So like I had been in the tub like this, laid back, as you know, you are in a tub. And I just felt like, oh, I feel pressure on my tailbone. I should change how I'm sitting. So I tried to move, I tried to sit up, and I was like, no, now I feel pressure on my sit bones. And then I was like, okay, I'll get on my knees. And then it just felt like there was all this pressure on my knees. So it was like, no matter how I moved, I was so uncomfortable. And so then, because I was in the tub, it was a very small room. My midwife had like left the main room for a little bit. She'd gone back to the nurse's station. And so I told Jordan, I was like, you need to call the midwife and have her come back because I'm feeling a lot of pressure. And that seemed to go by pretty quick. Like I don't think I was in the tub for more than like 30 to 45 minutes, but I went from about a 5 to about an 8, I believe, in the tub. So we called the midwife back in. I was feeling a lot of pressure. I was really at this point not getting a lot of rest between my contractions, and which is funny because I can distinctly remember a point in the tub when the nurse came in and she's like, okay, we're gonna up your Pitocin. And I was just like, oh, why? Like things are clearly moving, like why are we upping the Pitocin? And so I watched her like change it, which come to find out later, there was not even that much Pitocin being administered. So we called the midwife in, went back into the main room, and at this point in time, I told her, like, I want to be on my knees. Like, that's, nothing feels comfortable, but I feel like that's how I want to be. And so those hospital beds can configure so many different ways. So they configured it kind of like a chair. So basically my knees were on the base of the chair and I had my hands on the back of the bed. And so I was able to kind of like pull and give me some like counter pressure essentially. And that was really helpful, way more comfortable for me than I think sitting or laying down would have been. And so Jordan was up by my head. He had a cold washcloth that he was like dabbing on my forehead in between contractions, which was so sweet. I don't know if that was his idea or a nurse's, but it was fantastic. And we like pretty much as soon as we got into that position, I was like, I feel like I need to push. And so we slowly started pushing, and it's just so crazy how your body kind of takes over and starts pushing on its own. You're kind of just like, that's like the whole thing of labor. You're basically just have to like get out of your own way and let your body do what it needs to do. And that definitely was true of the pushing stage of labor. So we're pushing baby out. I'm very much staying like in my head, in labor land as they call it, just like breathing through everything. And I did hear a little bit behind me the nurse mentioning something about baby's heart rate to the midwife. I think she just said something about like, hey, did you see that? And so I was like, don't tune into it, like they're taking care of it, just focus on you. And but I knew something was going on. And around that same time, I heard the midwife, the way she was saying things changed. It was no longer like just, you know, you're doing great, keep it up. It changed to like, okay, mama, let's get her here. And she was like a lot more firm and like things needed to happen. I was like, okay, let's, you know, buckle down, let's do this. And come to find out later, of course, they didn't tell me in the moment, thank goodness, but I had a long umbilical cord. So as she started descending, it got wrapped around her neck. And so that was causing her heart rate to drop. So eventually they told me like, okay, on this next contraction, don't push. And she had to reach up, the midwife, and like unhook it from around baby's neck so that she could come down. And so I don't remember that being painful. I just remember being more annoyed than anything, like, oh, I can't push. But anyways, we kept going. I really feel like the pushing stage went by so fast. I asked Jordan, like time-wise, how long he thought it was, and we're both thinking it was probably around 45 minutes. Not entirely sure. That's just kind of like our best guess. But it's just crazy when you do an unmedicated labor how you can feel everything. And I know that sounds dumb because like obviously if it's unmedicated, you can feel everything. But like 2 pushes before she came out, I literally said, oh my gosh, she's coming. Because I could just like feel where she was at and I could feel the movement. And then as she came out, I could feel it like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like I felt all of it come out. And it was just like the craziest feeling in the world. And that is the only way I can describe it. And so I was like on my knees. So she came out, they passed her up to me like through my knees. I held her to my chest. Then I like turned around and sat down. And I know some people have said like they hold their baby to their chest and they're like, I feel like I've known them all my life. And I had a different reaction and I was like, we're doing skin to skin, but like I just like wanted to peek down. I was like, I'm holding my baby and I know it's my baby, but I don't even know what it looks like because she was like down so far in my chest, like I couldn't see her face, and she was like nuzzled into me. So I was like, I'm holding my child and I have no idea what my child looks like. Like that was what came to my mind. But yeah, incredible labor and delivery. So grateful. Because I'm sure people will ask this, I did have just one first degree tear and then a couple, forget what she called it. She called it something funny. Not a rug burn, but she called it something like that, where it's basically just like, it scratched like the top surface of the skin, but not enough to be considered like a true abrasion. So yeah, I had the one first degree tear and then like a couple of those. And so she just had to do a couple stitches. So that was the labor and delivery story. I there's so many things. I'll probably have to do like a postpartum or like a Q&A video or something after this, because I'm sure there's like little parts that I'm leaving out or that might be helpful. But yeah, honestly, even though I had to use Pitocin, which I didn't want, and it started with my water breaking, which is not what I was expecting, I felt like I was still able to have the unmedicated, calm labor and delivery that I wanted. And I'm so incredibly grateful for that. There was also so many little things that went amazingly according to plan. Like I know I've seen a lot of girls on YouTube that have been like, I'm praying to the Lord for a pain-free delivery in under 4 hours, or like something crazy like that. And I mean, faith can move mountains, like you go girl. But I was trying to like keep it manageable. So I was like, okay, dear Lord, I would like my labor less than 24 hours. But if I'm super blessed, I would love my labor to be 8 hours. 8 hours or less. And so from the time my water broke to when she was delivered, it was 14 hours. But again, those first 6 hours, I couldn't feel like I wasn't in pain. To me, it didn't feel like labor. So we got to the hospital at 1:20. Baby girl was born at 9:19 p.m. Basically exactly 8 hours was the true, like the time of the hospital. And so that was just really cool, knowing that I had prayed for 8 hours or less. And in my mind, like the painful part of it for sure was 8 hours or less, because that's as long as we were in the hospital before she came. So cool. I've also had people ask, because it was unmedicated, did it hurt worse than I expected? And, or like, how was the pain and all of that? And honestly, I'm here to tell you, this was my experience. It was not near as bad as I feel like people make it out to be. And I think part of that is mindset. I definitely went into it with the mindset that like it's going to be intense, and it was. But all those contractions I'd mentally prepared for. I'd done the meditations where you're like picturing a wave washing over you, like all of these like hippie things. But it really did help in the moment, because you have that reminder of like, it's going to like come, it's going to peak, and then it's going to go away. Like these contractions, like the pain of the contractions is not consistent. It comes, it goes, and you just have to like breathe through it. And so that was super helpful. There was, like I said, never a point where I felt like I needed the epidural, never a point where I felt like I can't do this, and I never thought of it as pain. It just felt to me like pressure, like building pressure. And this is kind of like a gross way to describe it, but I assume if you're watching this, a lot of you maybe are like getting ready to have a baby, and this might be helpful for you. But I felt like the pressure was kind of like if you're super constipated or just have like really bad indigestion, where like the pressure's just building and you can't release it. That's basically what it felt like to me. Like it didn't feel like pain. I've heard some people equate it to like, oh my gosh, it felt like knives, or like a snake was wrapping itself around me, or like these super dramatic things. And I think when we put that in our minds, then that's what we focus on, and we like name it as pain. So I don't know, again, this is my experience. So yeah, that was my labor and delivery. It was incredible. Again, I'm sure I'm leaving out things. If you have more questions, if you want me to do a Q&A or a postpartum video, anything like that, let me know. Leave it in the comments down below. But I'm so glad you guys came along with me on this journey of my fertility journey, my pregnancy journey, and now with the labor and delivery and the birth of our daughter. Spoiler alert, her name is Chloe Elizabeth Desjardins. So she arrived February 28th, 9:19 p.m. She's the cutest baby in the whole wide world. Yes, I'm completely biased, but I feel like it's true. So anyways, thanks so much for watching. I am 6 weeks postpartum right now, and just finally had time to sit down and film this video, and I actually need to get going because we are about to leave the house to go to a friend's house. So things have been crazy. I'm not going to promise when this is going to go up on YouTube or when other videos are coming. I would still love to continue sharing with you, but life is a little crazy right now, and Chloe is the priority. So thanks again. I will see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.